$4.5 million. That is what Russia pays for a single T-90M Proryv, the most modern tank in its arsenal, the one it rolls through Red Square on Victory Day. A Ukrainian drone crew took one apart with a machine that costs about $400, and not once. Again and again through 2025, the same regiment, the same method. Find the flagship tank, stop it, then finish it. This is the story of how Ukraine turned Russia's proudest armor into the worst trade on the battlefield. The unit at the center of it has a name that has become a headline in its own right. The 429th Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment, better known by its call sign, Achilles. And the thing to understand before anything else is that this was never a lucky shot. On March 31, 2025, Ukraine's Khortytsia Operational Strategic Group reported that an Achilles crew had destroyed a T-90M and damaged a second tank on the Eastern Front, together with a support truck and a machine gun position. Nearly 5 months later, on August 17, a near-identical report surfaced, again crediting Achilles, again citing that same $4.5 million price tag. Separate open-source reporting put another Achilles T-90M kill in the Kharkiv region. Different days, different sectors, same signature. That is what makes this worth 20 minutes of your time. One destroyed tank is a bad afternoon for a Russian battalion. A repeatable method for destroying the best tank Russia builds is a problem for the entire war. So let us start with the tank, because you cannot understand why this matters until you understand what the T-90M actually is to the Russian army. The Proryv is not a mass vehicle. Russia fields thousands of older machines, the T-72B3, upgraded again and again since the 1970s, and the T-80BVM, a gas turbine tank that drinks fuel but moves fast. Those are the workhorses. The T-90M sits above them. It is the modern flagship, the one with the newer fire control system, the thermal sights good enough to spot a man at night across a field, the Relikt explosive reactive armor bricks bolted across the hull and turret to defeat incoming missiles. It carries a welded turret with better protection than the older cast designs. On paper, it is one of the best protected tanks in the world. Russia does not have many of them at the front, and it cannot build them quickly. Western estimates put annual T-90M output in the low hundreds at best, and a meaningful share of that is rebuilds, not new hulls. Everyone that burns is one Russia struggles to replace. That scarcity is the whole point. When a T-72 dies, Russia pulls another out of a Soviet-era storage yard, bolts on a cope cage, and sends it forward. When a T-90M dies, there is no dusty depot full of spares in the Urals waiting to top up the number. The Proryv is the tank Russia was counting on to lead its most important assaults, to punch through where the older armor could not. Losing it does not just cost money, it costs the sharp end of the spear. Now put a $400 drone against it. An FPV drone, first-person view, is about as simple as a flying weapon gets. A small quadcopter frame, 4 motors, a battery, a camera that streams video back to a pilot wearing goggles, and a warhead strapped to the front, often a repurposed anti-tank grenade or a shaped charge built in a workshop. The pilot flies it like a video game, straight into the target, and the drone does not come back. The tactical versions Achilles uses over the front line are battery-powered quadcopters with a range measured in a handful of kilometers. They are cheap enough to lose by the dozen. And that is exactly why they work. Here is the asymmetry in plain numbers. A T-90M costs roughly $4.5 million. An FPV strike drone costs somewhere between $400 and a couple $1,000 depending on the warhead and the build. Even if a crew burns through 10 drones to finish one tank, and they usually need far fewer, the trade still runs better than 1,000 to 1 in Ukraine's favor. No armor budget on Earth survives that math for long, but cost is only half the story. The other half is where these drones hit. A tank's armor is not spread evenly. The designers put the thickest steel where the threats have always come from: the front, the glacis plate, the turret face. That is where a shell from another tank would strike, or an anti-tank missile fired flat across the ground. For a century, that assumption held. Threats came in low and from the front, so you armored low and to the front. The top of the tank, the roof of the turret, the engine deck at the rear was always the thin part because nothing was supposed to come from above. An FPV drone comes from above, or from the flank or the rear, or straight down into the engine louvers. The pilot chooses. He is looking through that camera and he can steer the warhead into the exact seam where the armor is weakest. the roof over the crew, the gap between turret and hull, the vents feeding the engine. All that Relikt reactive armor across the front counts for nothing when the hit lands on 10 or 20 millimeters of roof plate. The most expensive tank in the Russian inventory has the same thin roof as the cheapest one. Achilles built a method around that fact. That is the setup. A $400 machine that can go where $4.5 million of protection is thinnest, flown by a crew that has done it enough times to make it routine. The rest of this video is how that routine actually runs, the reconnaissance, the weight, the strike, and what the numbers look like when you add them up, because the single strike is dramatic. The pattern behind it is the real weapon. Let us go to the hunt itself. An FPV strike does not begin with the strike. It begins hours, sometimes days earlier, with someone watching. Along the Eastern Front, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones sit high over the Russian rear. Small fixed-wing scouts and quadcopters loitering above the tree lines, feeding video back to command posts dug into the earth. They are looking for movement, a fresh set of track marks in the mud, a vehicle tucked under a camouflage net that was not there yesterday, the thermal glow of an engine that has just been started. A tank cannot hide the way a man can. It is heavy, it is hot, and it leaves a trail. When a T-90M moves toward the line, it announces itself in a dozen small ways. The Proryv is a valuable machine, so the Russians tend to hold it back until they need it, then push it forward for a specific assault. That forward movement is the window. Reconnaissance operators geolocate it, log its position, and hand the target to a strike cell. Somewhere back from the line in a dugout or a shell of a building, an FPV crew gets the coordinates and starts prepping birds. An FPV crew is usually 2 or 3 people, and the work is more deliberate than the goggles and adrenaline image suggests. One is the pilot flying. Another handles the technical side, swapping batteries, arming warheads, checking the video link and the radio frequencies, because Russian jamming can cut a drone's signal in an instant. A third may run navigation and observation, watching the scout feed, calling corrections. They are not gambling. They are running a kill chain, and the T-90M is the highest value link they will touch all week. The Russian side of this equation is built on an assumption that no longer holds. For generations, a tank crew's mental map of danger pointed forward and out. The threats were other tanks, artillery, mines, missile teams, all of them at a distance, all of them roughly at eye level. A crew learned to angle the hull, to use the terrain, to keep the thick armor pointed at the guns. None of that training tells you what to do about a small buzzing object that drops out of the sky behind you and steers itself into your engine deck. The doctrine simply does not have an answer, and you can see the Russians reaching for improvised ones. The cope cages, the slat armor, the electronic warfare boxes bolted to the turret roof, the tanks draped in so much added metal they look like rolling sheds. Every one of those is an admission that the assumption broke. And here is the trap inside the trap. All that improvised armor makes the tank heavier, slower, and harder for the crew to see out of. A T-90M weighed down with cages and nets is a T-90M that cannot maneuver freely, cannot spot the drone coming, and cannot outrun it. The countermeasures buy a little protection against a single hit and cost mobility everywhere else. Against a crew like Achilles, which plans on multiple drones, a little protection against one hit is not enough. By late March 2025, on the Eastern Front, all of these threads came together. Reconnaissance had a T-90M on the move, part of a small Russian effort probing the line with armor and a support vehicle in trail. An Achilles crew took the tasking. What happened next is the moment that turned into a headline reported by Ukraine's Kortitsia command, and it is worth walking through slowly because it shows the method that makes the whole thing repeatable. The first job is never to destroy the tank. The first job is to stop it. A moving tank is a hard target and a dangerous one. It can reach cover, back into a tree line, put a building between itself and the sky, or simply drive out of the drone's short range before the pilot lines up a clean hit. So the opening move in the Achilles method is a mobility kill. Put the first drone into the running gear or the rear, where a hit can throw a track, wreck a road wheel, or knock out the engine. The tank does not have to explode, it just has to stop. Once it stops, it belongs to the drones. Watch the approach. The FPV comes in low and fast, skimming the ground, using the folds of the terrain to stay out of the crew's narrow field of view. Inside a buttoned-up tank, the crew sees the world through vision blocks and sights, slits and screens that show a fraction of the sky. A drone coming in at rooftop height from the flank is exactly where they are not looking. The pilot, watching through his goggles, guides the warhead into the lower rear of the hull. Impact. The tank lurches and grinds to a halt, one track spilled or an engine drowned in its own smoke. The most modern tank in the Russian army is now a stationary $4.5 million box in an open field. That is the micro-crisis, and it is the crew's last chance. A stop tank still has options for a few seconds. The men inside can bail out and run. They can try to fight the drone with a rifle. They can hope their electronic warfare box scrambles the next signal. In practice, against a prepared strike cell, those seconds run out fast, because the second drone is already inbound. This is the part that separates a good crew from a lucky one. Achilles does not fire one drone and hope. The strike is planned in sequence, immobilize with the first, then finish with the follow-up. The second FPV climbs and comes down onto the top of the tank, into the turret roof or the engine deck. The thin plate the designers never armored because they never expected a threat from above. The shaped charge punches through. Now you are into the fighting compartment or the engine, into the ammunition or the fuel. On a T-90M, as on any tank, a hit that reaches the ammunition ends the argument. The turret can be lifted clean off its ring by its own exploding shells, a phenomenon the crews on both sides know by grim shorthand, and the cameras have recorded again and again across this war. On the Eastern Front that day, the Kortitsia report was specific about the tally: one T-90M destroyed, a second tank, most likely a T-72B3, damaged in the same action, a support truck knocked out, a machine gun position eliminated. Not one drone, not one target, a crew working a cluster of Russian assets and taking the crown jewel among them off the board. The crew of the destroyed Proryv did not survive the sequence. What Russia lost was not a man. It was a machine it cannot easily replace, and the confidence that its best armor could survive the approach to the Ukrainian line. Hold that number in your head: one T-90M, one afternoon. One crew with cheap drones, because the reason this is a documentary and not a news clip is what happened next. It kept happening. Roll forward to August 17, 2025. A new report, a new day, the same signature. Achilles again, a T-90M again. That same $4.5 million figure again, the number Ukrainian military reporting attaches to the Proryv every time one burns. The location unspecified, as it often is when the fighting is fluid and the exact grid is kept quiet for operational reasons. Separately, open-source analysts documented another Achilles T-90M destroyed in the Kharkiv region. 3 data points, spread across months and sectors, all pointing at the same unit and the same class of target. That is no longer an incident. That is a program. And it is worth being precise about what is confirmed and what is not, because this channel does not dress up guesses as intelligence. The confirmed core is this: Ukrainian military and state-linked reporting credited the Achilles regiment with destroying T-90M tanks with FPV drones on those dates, and put the price of each tank at around $4.5 million. Russia has not corroborated these specific losses. It rarely admits to any. The minute-by-minute texture of the strike, the exact order of the drones, the precise seams they hit, is reconstruction built from how these engagements are known to unfold across thousands of recorded strikes, not a transcript of one. What is not in doubt is the outcome and the trade. The best tank in the Russian inventory destroyed by drones that cost less than the crew's night vision goggles. So what did Russia actually lose beyond one hull? Start with the money. Because the money is the cleanest way to see it. $4.5 million per T-90M, against a few hundred to a couple thousand for the drones that killed it. Even the most generous accounting for Ukraine, every scout flight, every drone expended, every hour of 2 or 3 operators' time, does not come close to closing that gap. Russia spends millions. Ukraine spends the price of a used car. Run that exchange across a front and across a summer, and you are watching one army's armor budget bleed out through a wound its accountants cannot cauterize. Then the scarcity. Russia can flood the line with refurbished T-72s from storage almost indefinitely, and it does. It cannot do that with the T-90M. New Proryv production runs in the low hundreds a year at most, and the front eats tanks faster than that when they are used aggressively. Every T-90M an Achilles crew removes is a tank that will not lead the next assault, will not be there for the next push, will not exist to be photographed rolling into a captured town. The Flagship is supposed to be the vehicle that makes the hard attacks possible. Take enough of them off the board and the hard attacks stop being possible at all. Then the doctrine, which is the deepest cut. A tank is only as useful as a commander's willingness to send it forward. If a battalion commander knows that pushing a T-90M toward the Ukrainian line means a real chance of losing it to a $400 drone before it fires a shot, he starts holding it back. He uses it more cautiously, keeps it further from the front, commits it only when he has to. That caution is itself a victory for the defender. A tank parked safely in the rear is not breaking through anything. The drones do not even have to destroy every Proryv to win this fight. They only have to make the Russians afraid to use them, and the balance sheet does the rest. That fear has a name in the improvised armor you see on every Russian tank now. The cope cages, the anti-drone nets, the jammers, the tanks so buried in scrap metal they can barely see. All of it is a reaction to crews like Achilles. And all of it trades away the very things that made a tank. Its speed, its vision, its shock. A T-90M is a machine built to move fast and hit hard. Wrap it in enough anti-drone armor to survive the approach and you have slowed it, blinded it, and turned it into a bunker that happens to have tracks. Ukraine did not have to defeat the Proryv's armor. It made the Proryv defeat itself. There is one more thing the drones changed, and it is the thing that makes this a campaign rather than a stunt. Skill compounds. The first time a crew hunts a tank, it is hard. By the 10th time, it is a checklist. Achilles is not a single gifted pilot who got lucky on the Eastern Front in March. It is a regiment, a structure for training pilots, building drones, running reconnaissance, and passing the method from one crew to the next. That is why the same signature shows up in March and again in August in the East and in the Kharkiv region. The knowledge does not die with the drone, it spreads. And a method that spreads is far more dangerous to Russia than any single weapon because you cannot shoot down a technique. Which brings the two numbers back together, the ones we opened with. $4.5 million for the tank, 400 for the drone. For most of the history of armored warfare, the expensive machine won because nothing cheap could reach the part of it that mattered. That century-long assumption is what an Achilles crew canceled on the Eastern Front, and then again in August and again near Kharkiv. Russia still builds the best tank it has ever fielded. Ukraine has simply made it too expensive to use, one $400 drone at a time. The Proryv was designed to break through. On this front, it mostly breaks down and burns, and the crews who fly the drones that do it have stopped treating the most modern tank in the Russian army as anything special at all. It is just another target with a thin roof.